And it's the soul of business, is what, for me, is what it means to be a modern day millionaire. It's not just about the acquisition of money. It's about so much more. In the book, I talk about something that I've called the merchant priest. And this doesn't have any religious connotation. The word priest, if you go back, ancient Greek, basically was an elder that facilitated and held a space. And the space that I'm talking about here has to do with consciousness. When you're looking at business today, business is the most pervasive force on this planet. There is nothing that escapes the touch of business, for ill or good. People that are in business, and that's every single one of us, whether you're running it, whether you're a part of it, whether you're working in it, we have a responsibility, a moral responsibility, to take account of what's the consequence of what we do. That's what it means for me to be a modern day millionaire. It means about looking to the future and looking at 7 generations out. I mean, just to go back to some ancient wisdom. What are we actually doing in the ways that we live our lives? Well, how do we examine what we do in the light of day? And then where do we move to from there? Each of us, and Michael mentioned this, is a vessel that is full. You know, how many of you have seen the new HBO series, Westworld? If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. It's a fascinating existential play. There's, I think the latest episode, the Westworld is a theme park, so to speak. It's populated by robots that look human. And humans come there to interact with the robots. The humans know that the robots are there, but the robots don't know that they're robots. Now, in this last scene, one of the robots was accompanying one of the humans. And the human, they went into this room. And the human says, I wonder where that door goes. And the robot said, what door? I don't see the door. Right. And what was going on there, and the maker of the robot had said just a little bit before this scene, if there's anything that the robots encounter in the world that is going to jeopardize their sense of safety, they're not going to see it. They're not going to notice it. We are programmed, our minds, and this is where Bob's material is so rich. Our minds keep us from seeing what's possible. It's there. It is there. All we need do, and this is in the scriptures, is move through the door. The veil is non-existent, except in our mind. Merchant priests do this. They hold a space. They hold an elevated space that says, here's what's possible. I used to train trainers a lot, and I've been doing this since about 1975. And when I was working with trainers to train trainers, the one admonition that I would give them to begin with is, you will set the ceiling that will allow people to move. And they will not move beyond the ceiling that you have set. Our job as merchant priests, our job as leaders, our jobs as modern day millionaires, is to be able to examine ourselves. I just led a mindfulness conference in Philadelphia last week. And mindfulness for the sake of what? That was a question that came back to me. And I said, well, here's the way that this works. You become mindful. You have a mindfulness practice. How many of you have a mindfulness practice? You sit, whatever it may be. For the sake of what? For the sake of becoming awake. And when you become awake, that's the gateway to becoming alive. And that's where we want to move. You move from mindfulness to wakefulness to aliveness. And it's such a beautiful journey. Years ago, I was doing a sales training. And one of the fellas that I was developing the program with had this little saying that I just went, when he told it to me, I just kind of rocked back on my heels. What he said is this. He says, you know what a rut is? And I said, no, what's a rut? He says, a rut is a coffin with the ends kicked out. How many of you are living in a rut? I mean, it's a coffin with the ends kicked out. We don't know it because we can't see it. We want to be able to rise above it. That's what being a modern day millionaire is about. You don't do it for yourself. You do it because you elevate everything. Business is the single most pervasive force on this planet. If you're an oyster in the middle of the Pacific, Your shell right now is being decalcified because of CO2 in the water. It's amazing what we can do. It's amazing what we have done. And it's amazing where we can move to. When Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, which was the basis for our capitalist model of business, he talked about the invisible hands. And the invisible hands spoke to mutual benefit. And that was the wealth of nations. You trade with me, I trade with you, we both benefit. What people don't know is that before he wrote in 1776, The Wealth of Nations, he wrote another book 14 years before that called The Moral Imperative. The moral imperative informed the invisible hands. It was an answer to the Cartesian notion of separation. René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That whole notion is about, I am separate from the rest of reality, the rest of the world. Adam Smith was looking with the invisible hands to join together again. All that we touch. Business touches everything. From a perspective of consciousness, that's our challenge. And that's our opportunity. I was doing some reading the other day, and great disappointment. There's a fascinating phrase here. Sufi master said, in times of great disappointment, a master experiences great excitement. That's what we want to move to. We want to move to mastery. We're not run by externalities. We're not run by what's going on in the world around us. From a position of mastery, this is what being a modern day millionaire is about. It's about taking that pendulum that has swung to separation, bringing it back to where we now can step into this place of saying, I am connected with everything and I make a difference. That's where I'm moving. That's what I get to do. I get to make a difference because I am a difference. That's cool. And I think I've got, that's my time. I've got 3 more minutes? Great. Questions? Anybody have some questions? I'd love to take some. If you had one, what would it be? Right here. Oh, right there. Okay. Peggy.
I totally agree with you that businesses have the potential to be the greatest force to change this world, but it means changing the culture. So I'd just love to hear about what are some things that you're doing, so rather than it's on this sort of individualistic approach, but it's really about the we and, being proud of being that force for good.
That's great. I love that question. 2 weeks ago, I was in Beijing, and I gave a keynote speak to 1,100 people. It was filmed and broadcast by CCTV, the National Chinese News Broadcasting Network. And the focus was on, it was basically a coaching conference. Conference of coaches. The largest coaching schools in China had assembled this group of people. And we did it at the Beijing Conference Center. It's an enormous Olympic site. And that was my message. I said, and I'm in conversation with folks in China about, as you move from what you have had as an economic model to where you're actually wanting to aspire, which is wealth creation. They wouldn't call it a capitalist model. But that's essentially what they're moving towards. They need to be careful and they need to be aware of not duplicating what we have done in the West. And that's a message that is being received well. They're paying attention to it. It's the Wild West in a lot of areas right now. Cynthia and I do a fair amount of work, and she definitely does a lot of work in Africa. We're moving into India right now with the Unstoppable Foundation, and she'll talk about that in a bit. The difference that we make there has to do with finding ways to connect people to this notion that what you are and what you do makes a difference. That's the key. And I love what Michael said about the 3.0. Mission has a business. And that business takes all kinds of forms, whether it's mamas in the Masai Mara beading. That has a mission. That has a mission that uplifts. It's a whole mission. And these women are so proud of what they're doing. And what they get to be as a consequence of having that opportunity. It's so cool. It's amazing. Great question. Over here.